Welcome to Super Mario Bros. Bonanza, the show where I'll be reviewing every single Super Mario platformer and ranking them from best to worst. In the past I ranked the first 18 mainline games, and now it's time to tackle those that have been remade. Last time I reviewed Super Mario All-Stars, and this week I'll be covering Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. The Game Boy and Game Boy Color sold astronomically well. With their numbers combined, Nintendo sold 118 million of those little handhelds. Naturally, Mario did well on the console. His first venture, Super Mario Land, sold over 18 million copies. Its sequel sold just a bit less, with 11 million copies. Any game would be lucky to sell to that many people, but with a Game Boy's lifespan extending throughout all of the 90s and into the new millennium, that Mario money only went so far. With the release of the Color hardware revision, it only made sense for Nintendo to further capitalize off of the plumber. SMB Deluxe released in 1999 in both North America and in the UK. Interestingly, Japan didn't get a proper release. Instead, interested parties could have the game copied to a memory cartridge at a Nintendo Power kiosk located in a Lawson convenience store starting in March 2000. Despite not properly releasing in Japan, Deluxe sold impeccably well too, ending with just over 5 million copies, and Nintendo went into the development cycle knowing this outcome, or at least very strongly believing it would be the case. Development was done by Nintendo Research and Development 2 and was led by Toshiaki Suzuki in his directorial debut. The team worked with Miyamoto and Nakago, who designed and programmed the original game respectively, and had a relatively pressure-free development cycle, porting both the original game and its sequel, as well as adding a whole variety of other features. And as a bonus, being one of the first games released on the Game Boy Color, Deluxe is the first handheld Mario game to appear in full color. Aside from selling well, Deluxe was also very well received both at the time and in retrospect. But for me, the game may as well have never existed. My first Game Boy was an Advance, and I never went back to any of the previous generation's games. And in my years of playing all the classic Super Mario platformers, finishing every single one and ranking them from best to worst, researching and reviewing each, I never noticed that Deluxe existed, to the point where I only stumbled upon Deluxe as I was looking up information about All-Stars. I was fully prepared to jump into the Advance series right now before panicking and scrambling for a playable copy of Deluxe. I at least was able to plug my Nintendo Switch SNES controller to my PC, so it wasn't entirely off. The Super Mario Advance series is a completely different story. Mario Advance and its sequels were my childhood Marios, sans World, which I first played on my SNES. For every other game, I didn't play the original versions until I purchased them on the Wii Shop. I couldn't give the exact order in which I received them, but I can guarantee I played the hell out of each and every one of the Advance games. Though I never had an e-reader, so I only played the basic Mario 3 levels. I have such fond memories playing Mario Bros. Classic while waiting at my dad's work one day, running through Mario Bros. 2 on a road trip to my nana's, playing Mario 3 while listening to a bunch of Beatles albums on a road trip down to my nino's, fantasizing and theorizing about the new intro to Mario World, where'd they'd get those balloons. I was incredibly excited to jump back into these versions after so many years. The Super Mario Advance series consists of 4 games. The first to release, Super Mario Advance, is a remake of Super Mario Bros. 2 USA and released in March 2001 as a GBA launch title. In late 2001 and early 2002, Super Mario World Super Mario Advance 2 released. Yoshi's Island Super Mario Advance 3 released later in 2002, and finally Super Mario Advance 4 Super Mario Bros. 3 released late 2003. They had a hard time landing on a naming convention. Despite that though, each game sold well. None reached quite as high as either of the land games, but the 2, 3, and World remakes managed to surpass the sales of Deluxe with over 5 million copies sold for each. Even Yoshi's Island Advance 3, while only reaching a respectable 2.8 million, still landed in the top 10 best-selling GBA games. After their success with Deluxe, Nintendo Research and Development 2 continued to lead the remake project with some supervision from key members of the original game's dev team. Advance 1 was directed by Toshiaki Suzuki, Advance 2 was directed by Hiroyuki Kimura, with supervision from Miyamoto himself, and Advance 3 and 4 were also directed by Kimura. Each successive game received less and less oversight from the original dev team, presumably due to trust in the team growing with each release. Each title was reworked and based on their SNES counterparts with varying levels of differences. They were all given new introduction cinematics, which led into a game selection screen with a choice between the original game or a remade version of the original Mario Bros. Arcade, dubbed Mario Bros. Classic. The main games themselves were all somewhat compressed due to the limitation of the GBA. The screen had less pixels to play with. It had more than the original Game Boy and Color screen, but much less than the SNES. As such, the camera is slightly zoomed in, and some of the levels themselves were reworked to fit the screen better. Due to the screen resolution and lack of backlight on the original GBA model, the color palettes of each game seem slightly washed out, and the music and sound effects are much more compressed. More substantially, each game was given something new to play with. Every stage in Advance 1 now has 5 ace coins to collect and a post-game challenge to find hidden Yoshi eggs. Advance 2 now keeps track of all the dragon coins collected, and each level has at least 5. Advance 3 has 6 new post-game levels, and Advance 4 was given a full suite of additions via the Nintendo e-reader device. The games are also now at least partially voice-acted. In Advance 1, Charles Martinet and Jen Taylor sound clips now accompany each playable character as they hop around. Plus the bosses shout at the player too.
This is as far as you go!
The rest of the games also include Martinet and Taylor, albeit with less regularity than in Advance 1, and Kazumi Totaka now voices Yoshi in Advance 3. Speaking of Yoshi, Yoshi's Island is not a Mario game, it's a Yoshi game. As such, it will not be mentioned again. I did not play it, but I was unimaginably ready to play the other 3 titles and to finally see what was up with that e-reader stuff. At the top, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe is Super Mario Bros. With some nice accoutrement. There's a pretty new title screen, a nice new selection menu accompanied by pleasant new music. Then, when in the game itself, the levels are broken up by a really neat map screen showing where Mario is on his adventure, with some neat animations like Mario crushing each fortress underfoot, and a high score menu tracking how well each run went. Aside from that, it's mostly Super Mario Bros. It looks a lot like the original game. Due to the smaller screen, the HUD elements are simplified a bit, but the graphics and music feel like they're straight from the NES. With one major problem. The smaller screen also means less of the level can be shown at one time. The development team accounted for this. The camera can be repositioned to look up or down, so not all jumps will be leaps of faith, and Mario can run backwards a bit more than usual, but it doesn't fix a bullet bill coming in from just off screen, or a Koopa shell, or a Goomba. It was deeply frustrating not being able to see as much real estate as I could in any other version of this game. I understand sacrifices had to be made for this to work on a handheld, but throughout my 40 minutes of playing, I found myself longing for the land games, since they were at least designed for the console's screen. But Deluxe doesn't just contain a somewhat upgraded version of Super Mario Bros., it also includes the lost levels after beating the original, which I didn't do. So I didn't play lost levels, as well as some really cool other features. Playing through the game unlocks images in a gallery, there's a calendar, and a fortune teller for some reason. But the meatiest and most interesting additions were the challenge and boo modes. The challenge modes take every single level from the base game and adds red coins and Yoshi eggs to be found throughout each, as well as a goal to clear the stage with a very high score. The boo race was the most fascinating addition. Many levels were taken and modified to add new hazards for Mario as he races against a boo to the end goal. There are spikes, trampolines, different level geometry, and these boo blocks that toggle from solid to passive whenever Mario hits the face block or when the boo gets a little tricky. And there are a total of 3 boos to beat, each requiring a faster time to unlock and an even faster time to triumph. And I would have loved to have really sunk my teeth into both of these modes. I love when developers take existing levels and add to them to create new experiences. But I still don't like playing Super Mario Bros. All that much, and the shrunken screen was a no-go for me. I wasn't about to try to avoid the boo's new hazards or searching for every red coin when I couldn't see where I was going. Super Mario Bros. Deluxe is a really neat package. They added so many really cool things, but it's still Super Mario Bros. It still plays exactly like Super Mario Bros., unfortunately, and the screen is way too small. Despite its charm, I walked away more frustrated than anything. Super Mario Advance, on the other hand, oh my god, I'm in love. After having played both the original and All-Stars version of SMB2 USA a handful of times over the past few years, finally playing Advance 1 again felt like coming home. Even seeing the new intro cinematic was refreshing. The 4 playable characters take turns lining up, show off their unique jumps, then collectively pull out the logo from underground. Nostalgia aside, I really like how in this brief window the game is able to demonstrate a large aspect of how the characters are different and introduce plucking veggies as a concept. Before the main game, this and every other Advance game, and also Superstar Saga, included Mario Bros. Classic, and I love this little game. When the Advance series was first added to Nintendo Switch Online, the only thing I did was jump into Classic and play a run. It's simple, of course, there's no major deviation from the original. It controls a bit better, Mario and Luigi can grab the power block like in SMB2, and crouching for a bit charges a super jump. Other than that, it's just a great time defeating Spinies, Crafts, or Fighter Flies while collecting as many coins as possible for points, I guess. Give me a good podcast and I could play this game for hours on end. But if not choosing the Pipe Tube Mario Classic, the doors open to reveal Birdo and the group's adventure in Subcon. And this version of Super Mario Bros. 2 feels so good to play. The game as a whole was made significantly easier. Saving and game overs are much more forgiving. Many of the enemies were made easier, like ninjas taking longer to turn around or bullets traveling slower. Plus, the enemies only respawn when coming back in from a different area, where in the original game they respawn when the camera scrolls past their spawn point. And the most impactful, hearts and lives are so much easier to come by. Hearts can be found hovering in the air, have been swapped for some plants, and throwing something and defeating at least 2 enemies, or just one of the new large enemies, always spawns one. Plus more 1-ups have been added, including some trapped in bubbles, or getting each of the ace coins in a level. Speaking of leaving and re-entering areas, this causes both enemies and pulled out plants to respawn. On one hand, the enemies are back, but lives and hearts can be grinded by re-defeating them, and potions are much easier to play around with. If I was a few blocks off from the mushroom spawn, or maybe more than a few blocks in a few cases, I could almost always leave the area and try again. And there are more mushrooms per level. These modifications, as well as the game handling better in general, made for a much breezier experience. Instead of fighting against the controls and sometimes finicky hit detection, I had a great time exploring each level, searching out extra shrooms, and the 5 ace coins. It wasn't all perfect, of course. The screen size has shrunk a little bit. Some of this was alleviated by changing the levels themselves, but what it really meant was not always seeing as much of the level as I wanted. There is a way to toggle the camera position, but it never felt amazing. It was in no way as bad as it was in Deluxe, but it was suboptimal for sure. The graphics were arguably a downgrade as well. The washed out colors don't look quite as good as their SNES counterparts. But even with that, the team made some very cool changes. Peach is now Peach and is colored with her modern palette, and the character select screen does a neat trick where they rotate around. The bosses were also shuffled with a brand new Mecha Birdo being added in. It's just a big Birdo fight, but it had a couple new moves to avoid. The addition was cool. And the voice acting. Super Mario Advance is the very first time Charles Martinet appeared in a 2D Mario game, and it was a fascinating addition. Every time Mario jumps, or Peach digs, or Toad gets hit, their slightly compressed voices ring out. And I mean every time. Maybe they were a bit overzealous with that, but also all the bosses now have introductions and taunt the player before the fight. Birdo screaming, "I'll remember this," will stick with me forever. All the audio adds so much to the overall experience. The post-game was another great addition. After Wart is defeated, the mushrooms in each level are altered. There are now only 3 spots, 2 of which have been replaced by giant Yoshi eggs, both of which need to be collected during a single run without dying to be collected. It adds such a fun extra challenge to each level. Super Mario Advance is a great game. Super Mario Bros. 2 USA was already really good. The sense of adventure was already superb. All Stars added beautiful colors and backgrounds, and the ease of play and additional collectibles brought into Advance only made it even more fun to explore. It is the definitive version of Super Mario Bros. 2 USA. Super Mario World, Super Mario Advance 2. Super Mario World was already a perfect game. As such, the Advance version didn't have as much to update. However, that also meant it had much more to lose. First of all, I love the new introduction cutscene. Seeing Mario, Luigi, and Peach arrive on the island is such a nice touch. Mario and Luigi flying around, showing how the capes are utilized, while sampling a whole host of the various enemies to be encountered, sets up the game itself quite well. And the slight duck Luigi has to perform so as not to have his brain slammed by Mario is pretty darn cute. The actual game had very small adjustments. In this version, co-op was removed, so now Mario and Luigi can be toggled at will, and some of the levels were slightly adjusted to fit the smaller screen. But more importantly, where dragon coins were in most levels before, now ghost houses and castles include them too, and each level will have at least 5. Plus the select screen tracks every level's completion and which coins have been collected. The Dragon Coin progress resetting is my biggest complaint of the original Super Mario World. So then, what happened to make this game lesser? The wrappings are simply not as good. The colors are washed out, which was the case for Advance 1 too, but it's much more noticeable here. While technically looking worse than the All-Stars version, Advance still looks much nicer than its NES counterpart. Advance 2's only comparison is the SNES version, making the less than colors stand out significantly more. And the audio is bad. I've listened to the soundtrack and sound effects of Super Mario World more times than I can count. Their advanced counterparts are too compressed, too crunchy. In the attempt to fit this much sound on one GBA cartridge, they very nearly ruined these classic songs. It was honestly quite distracting at first. Even the addition of Charles Martinet's voice clips couldn't save it, although I will say they're quite memorable. I think of the "just what I needed" audio clip quite frequently, and the frequency was reduced to major events like collecting power-ups, finding all the dragon coins, or beating a level. It was no longer for literally every action. The game also loses some functionality with a lack of X and Y buttons. Spin jumping might technically be easier with it mapped to the R button, but it doesn't feel right. Also, it wasn't a common issue, but some of the objects I interacted with didn't have quite the correct physics. Things like the Reznor platforms or the skull boats had moments where jumping off or around them was off. Super Mario World Super Mario Advance 2 is still a really darn good game. Many of the additions were really nice to have. It's cool that castles are replayable, and how both them and ghost houses have dragon coins. It's nice that the game notifies you when every level's been completed, and the cutscene for collecting all the dragon coins and activating fall mode were really interesting. But all the nice to have additions didn't quite make up for everything lost during the conversion. But again, Super Mario World is still Super Mario World. It's still fun to play, regardless of the platform. Super Mario Advance 4 Super Mario Bros. 3. Look, it's still Super Mario Bros. 3. It looks near identical to its All-Stars counterpart. The colors are ever so slightly brighter, but it's not something I even noticed. The levels retained their similarity. Any updates were mainly to adjust for the screen, with a couple new item blocks placed here or there. One of the more interesting additions to the main game was Mario and Luigi mode. After Mario completes a level or dies, the game switches to Luigi, who can then travel to any available level to try that instead. The game tracks which brother beats which level, and each brother has their own life count and item inventories. And if they meet each other on the overworld map, one bro can pass lives from one to the other, or take them if he really needs it. Luigi controls a bit closer to how he handles in SMB 2, but it wasn't so bad. He's mainly just a little bit slippier. The other adjustments were fairly minor. Peach is recolored, everyone is voiced, although their lines are borrowed from previous entries, Peaches being ripped from Mario Sunshine. If every level was completed in a world, a nice splash screen announces it to the player, and the nicest touch, after beating Bowser for the first time, the world map opens up, allowing for any level in any world to be replayed. Where Mario Advanced 4 gets really interesting is with the e-reader levels. This being the final entry in the Advanced series, the development team had a bunch of previous assets to play around with, and they did. There are 73 levels in total, and they are wild. Like in Advanced 1 or 2, each has at least one Advanced coin to collect, with special levels containing a unique E-coin that's harder to acquire. Then I opened up the first and was greeted with a 1-to-1 recreation of World 1-1 from the original Super Mario Bros., working flagpole and all. Then later I traveled through a level with both buried turnips and chargin' chucks. So many elements from previous games were utilized to astonishing effect. Mario World-style ghost houses and springs show up. SMB2 flurries and hoopsters are rendered in Mario 3 styling. Even those horrible little penguins from Yoshi's Island pop up to push Mario around. Yoshi's Island is still not a Mario game. Having never seen any of these levels before, it was a true joy hopping into the next one and seeing what could be around every corner. And even aside from the novelty of the elements and enemies from other games, the levels themselves were a blast. The advanced coins added such a nice challenge. In some cases, they were the challenge. One level had the exit just to the right with no hazards in the way, but collecting every coin involved scouring a tall tower, traveling through door after door, seeking the solution to get to the next. The difficulty was no joke either. From extra long airship levels, underwater feats, digging frenzies, multi-pathed castles, the starting difficulty started with SMB3 World 8 and only got harder. It was so fun being truly challenged. I'm so glad I finally had a chance to master them all. If only I didn't have to do it with Luigi. In the base SMB3 mode, Luigi is manageable. In the e-reader levels, he controls much closer to SMB2. Oh, how I dislike Luigi's controls in SMB2. But the game tracks the advance coins, e-reader coins, and which brothers beat the level. So I had to beat them all with both. There's also a couple mini-games to get lives or items, they were fine. Super Mario Advanced 4: Super Mario Bros. 3, geez Nintendo, those titles, is a fantastic package. The base game alone wouldn't be worth too much. It is still a great game, of course, but the Mario and Luigi mode didn't add much. The e-reader levels put this title in a whole new level. Do I wish they were made with the Mario World physics engine? Yes, but alas, they were still stunning. And it's truly saddening that they were locked behind the poor-selling e-reader device until relatively recently. More fans should experience these extra levels. Overall, an absolutely stellar package. First, let's rank these games among themselves. Obviously, Deluxe is my number 4. The original 2 Super Mario Bros. Are already my least favorites in the group, and to me, the vastly smaller screen makes them all that much worse. Number 3 has to go to Mario World Advance 2. It's my favorite game, but the additions didn't add enough, and the compromises took too much. Number 2 is Mario Advance 4 SMB3. The e-reader levels are amazing, but the base game was exactly as good as it's always been, which is why my number 1 is Super Mario Advance. I love this game. It holds so much nostalgia for me, and it received the biggest updates to the gameplay itself. SMB2 was already improved by All-Stars, and the fact that it got remarkably better with Advance is a testament to the developers. And now to rank these in the overall 2D games list. As a reminder, the current ranking is 12 Super Mario Bros. 2 The Lost Levels, 11 Super Mario Land, 10 New Super Mario Bros. Wii, 9 New Super Mario Bros. 2, 8 Super Mario Land 2, 7 New Super Mario Bros., 6 Super Mario Bros. 2 USA, 5 New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, 4 Super Mario Bros., 3 Super Mario Bros. 3, 2 Super Mario All-Stars, and 1 Super Mario World. It might be unfair, but I'll be looking at these as 2 entries: Super Mario Bros. Deluxe and the Super Mario Advanced series as a whole. I do not like Deluxe very much, despite the neat addition, so I know it won't be very high overall, but despite Advanced 2 not doing much for Mario World, the overall package does so much for these classic games. This is such a tougher decision for me. Are these 3 games better than All-Stars? In some ways, yes, but All-Stars has the best versions of the original 2 games, and as a whole looks better. My new 2D Mario games ranking is 14 Super Mario Bros. 2 The Lost Levels, 13 Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, 12 Super Mario Land, 11 New Super Mario Bros. Wii, 10 New Super Mario Bros. 2, 9 Super Mario Land 2, 8 New Super Mario Bros., 7 Super Mario Bros. 2 USA, 6 New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, 5 Super Mario Bros., 4 Super Mario Bros. 3, 3 Super Mario All-Stars, 2 Super Mario Advanced Series, and 1 Super Mario World. Even though it's a worse version, Advanced does have Mario World, and the e-reader levels are darn good, and SMB2 is peak. Now on to the final remake, a full proper remake, taking one of the most beloved 3D Mario games and porting it to the then most recent handheld, the Nintendo DS. This was my first experience with this highly praised title, and it has forever warped my opinion of it. Needless to say, I am so ready to finally see if my nostalgia holds out when I replay Super Mario 64 DS. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on these handheld titles. Did the screen size affect your perception, or were you in the right generation to really love them? While you're here, maybe leave a rating on the video or subscribe to be notified of everything else I make. Or you can follow me on my social medias where I'm at Mario8 everywhere. Links to those are in the description. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.